Poke the Bear is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 150. My God, we're almost 50 away from 200, Connor. It's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Connor, you are all dressed up. Me and my collared shirt doesn't compare. Connor, what is up?
I'm doing well, Evan. You know, I looked at the last episode of record. I think I was wearing like a sweatshirt. Looked a little frumpy. Didn't look too good. So I figured I'd class it up a little bit for episode 150. So happy to be here.
I like that. You're all just dressed up and looking good. How was DC? Is this why is it true when Scott McLaughlin and I were on Bruins Beat, we were saying you were going to announce your run for presidency down in DC on a pro Bruins platform? Is this the kind of the makings of that?
Yeah, this is Mr. Ryan goes to Washington. No, it was good. It's good to went to Nationals Park, great ballpark. And kind of slept on. People are always like, yeah, it's kind of cookie cutter, but I like a good modern ballpark. I have a special place for Fenway, so I'll never like roast it. But like you then see like all these seats, there's like open air, open concourse. You can like actually like turn in your seat. It's not made out of wood. And you're like, yeah, it's pretty nice. But it was good. I always like DC. I feel like DC is always a spot that, whether it's history, whether it's food, all that stuff, great spot. So I was happy to be down there for a couple of days.
I remember when I went to Truist Park last year in Atlanta, I was shocked at, oh my God, I have space in my seat. Like, I'm not crammed next to me. I actually have a little wiggle room. So, but I'm with you. I'm not going to trash Fenway, but that sounds great. But now you're back. You are back and you had to go to Portland. Marcelo Mayer called up to AA and watching him and you had to put your baseball evaluator cap on. You took the hockey one off, baseball one on, and Portland, Maine. How about it? Nice place, though. I love Portland.
Always a great spot. It's always, you get up there. You know, I was only up there for the day, and as soon as I look around, I'm like, I could spend probably a couple of more days here, whether it's like food, breweries, all that stuff. Great spot. Only problem with Portland is in the summer, it is like impossible to like find parking or a hotel. It's like, oh, do you want to stay at like the Red Roof Inn? $500. It's like, okay, well, I'm not gonna do that, but
no thanks.
If you can find a spot up there, or you know someone who lives up there, it is maybe the most clutch New England summer, dare I say? I mean, Boston's its own thing. Like I won't not including Boston in the list, but Portland I think might be the best go-to spot in the summer in terms of food, all that stuff.
I agree. It's very underrated because even in Maine, I grew up going to like other places in Maine. It wasn't Portland. And you know, what are the other big cities in New England? You know, you have Newport, you have
Bridgeport, New Haven. No Connecticut. We're throwing Connecticut out of here.
Gone. Yeah. There's Portsmouth, New Hampshire, though, and there's some others.
Underrated spot.
Portsmouth, some good spots. Nice. But yeah, no.
Worcester.
Lowell, another good one. Yes, Worcester, Lowell. I mean, just we're playing the hits at this point. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Portland, Maine is a great place, and I look forward to hopefully getting up there at some point this summer. You know who will be looking for a change of location next year is Pierre-Luc Dubois. Again, feels like we're doing this all over again. Pierre-Luc Dubois, only 24, is an RFA. Yesterday in Pierre LeBrun's column in The Athletic, said that Pierre-Luc Dubois and his camp have informed the Jets that they don't want to re-sign and would like to work together on finding a trade. And it's interesting, Connor, because he's a center, 24, 6'2", 205, plays kind of a game that could fit here. We've discussed this. Now, Pierre LeBrun mentioned that the Canadians, as everybody expected, have been one of the teams that have inquired. But there are a few teams looking at this. He didn't mention who those teams were. He also said that the Jets aren't in a huge rush to deal him, which means that this is not going to be like a Taylor Hall leaving Buffalo at the deadline type thing. This is, you're getting a guy who they don't need to trade immediately. And also he could sign anywhere once he's off his RFA deal. Should the Bruins kick the tires on him?
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of kicking the tires, I think you have to if you're the Bruins, right? And it's you look at what he brings, and he kind of checks off what the Bruins should be targeting, right? Like we've mentioned this, whether it's trading for a guy like Zaka and signing him long term, trading for Lindholm. Like, as much as the Bruins have been fixated on this win now window for however long they've had Bergeron and Krejci, they've also, been able to add these other assets and keep them here long term as part of that next wave. And if you're able to get a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's 24 going on 25, and you can sign him to a long term deal, what's kind of the one missing piece out of this Bruins core for the future, right? You got Pasternak, you got McAvoy, you got Lindholm, you got probably Swayman, right? One thing you're missing is like young centers down the middle. And if you, 2-3 years down the road, you have Dubois and Zaka or whoever it is, you're cooking, right? You've got a pretty good core in place, signed long term, cap jumps up. Like, you can build around that next core and have a pretty competitive team. And I think you look at Dubois, is he like a superstar like an Eichel or like a Kachuk in terms of his impact? Probably not. Like, I think he's a guy that plays at his best 60, 70 points. Maybe, again, still a very good player. I think where you can kind of draw a little bit of parallels with like the Kachuk trade is he gives you an added, doesn't change your identity, but gives you a valuable asset in terms of a guy that can give you 30 goals, but plays, a really physical game. It's a pain in the ass to play against, adds that extra little bit of snarl that I think you need in the playoffs. And I think we've kind of talked about it. It's like guys like that make an impact. You're not getting these like big, like Nick Ritchies or whatever these guys are and acquiring them to really change the entire identity of your team or what have you. It's these guys like Kachuk or even, Blake Coleman's not a big guy, but he's a guy that, is physical, lays well, can score you 20 goals. Those are the guys that I think in today's NHL really thrive and add you that extra element, especially in the playoffs. So if you're able to get a guy like Dubois that fits that criteria, it makes plenty of sense in terms of why the Bruins should be going after him. I think what we're probably going to talk about next is what do you have to give up to get him? Because it's going to be a lot. And Winnipeg is not really a team that fits, with what the Bruins are probably comfortable with trading in any moves this offseason.
Yeah, the other thing before we hit on the trade aspect of it, what it would take, is this a guy you want to give up a lot for?
Yeah.
Because clearly, I mean, kind of forced his way out of Columbus, is forcing his way out of Winnipeg. Now, granted, in fairness to him, neither of those places are meccas that you'd want to be in. I will give him that. But at the same time, to kind of have this mentality at such a young age of, I want to go where I want to go. And, I mean, he wasn't the sole culprit last year with that Jets team, but you heard Rick Bowness all season. The compete isn't there. This room isn't, doing what they're supposed to do. Now, again, that goes up to Scheifele and Blake Wheeler and, those guys as well. But Dubois is a part of that. And, I know we've kind of touched on it a little. Would a Bruins kind of locker room with guys like Brad Marchand? I'm assuming Patrice Bergeron's gone in this situation, but Marchand and some of those other guys in there, do they kind of shape him? Do they kind of say, hey, you're going to have to kind of assimilate a bit to this locker room? Or is it a problem? Or does he come in and say, no, I want to be in Montreal. I don't want to be here. Because I would assume the Bruins are only trading for him if they can get him long term.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to be something similar to wherever he gets traded. It's going to be kind of like the Kachuk trade, where it's you give up that RFA year, you sign long term, and it facilitates a trade. Because I think every team is pretty worried about the fact that he could just go to Montreal in 24, right? So I think any team would like to acquire him with the guarantee that he's going to be there, considering what you're probably going to have to give up to get him. And yeah, I mean, it is a risk, right? This isn't a guy that has a clean slate in terms of, I mean, we saw how he was when he wanted out of Columbus, and it was pretty embarrassing the way he played over those very few games. Again, it's tough to remove kind of that stink out of these guys that have been in Winnipeg that you hear time and time again of just how unaccountable, dreadful, whatever you want to say about kind of that core in place. Now, is he the main conduit of it? That remains to be seen, right? He's a guy that has joined the last 3 years on this Winnipeg team. But you can also then point to, as you said, the Bruins have brought in other guys that have had labels of, maybe being difficult or what have you, and they've bought into the system. Even look at like Eichel when Vegas got him. He was viewed as a guy that was a little bit difficult, but give him an opportunity to finally thrive in a I guess, bigger market, but, in a team that can contend for a Stanley Cup.
A competent franchise.
Yeah, I think you've seen how he's bought into that, right? Like, I think he's fully assimilated into what Bruce Cassidy and the Golden Knights need him to do beyond just the rack up points, right? Like he's been much better defensively. He's been more accountable, playing through injuries. So you hope that, being put in a spot like this, it's not like he's going from, all right, Columbus, all right, Winnipeg, all right, Boston. Like it's an original six franchise that is also pretty close to Montreal anyway. You can drive up there if you need to, but
aren't they making a train? Weren't they talking about making a train route from Boston to Montreal too? So you can use that.
I believe so. He's got that as well. So yeah, I think I just saw something recently in The Athletic too from I believe it was like the Jets beat reporter up there that said that Dubois is probably going to give like a list of like 5-6 teams, and some of what he's considering beyond Montreal is being part of a Stanley Cup contender too. So again, are the Bruins a Stanley Cup contender? We'll see. But beyond like I imagine Vegas, Colorado, like if the Bruins are in that mix, then that is still a pretty appealing offer in terms of where the Bruins view him and what he could do here. So again, I don't think you really roll the dice, but it is something to be very cognizant about in terms of what you're kind of getting in a player like Dubois. You imagine being put in a situation like this, he'd thrive and probably even elevate his game from what you've already seen from him. But I don't know. He doesn't have a lot. That's a lot of, I think, either optimism or it doesn't have a lot of goodwill working in his favor in terms of just expecting that to be the case and wherever he lands next.
No, it doesn't. The compete aspect of it is sort of lacking. I mean, you could make the case, if the Bruins wanted to make this case to him of like, hey, we add you, we're a cup contender. Like, if let's say Bergeron's gone, you go out and get Dubois and Zacha down the middle. You got your guys on the wing. Yeah, you probably have to do some cap maneuvering, but you have Swayman in net most likely. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's the pitch they make. But again, like, again, this isn't the be all end all, but like I was just reading before we came on, like Jay Fresh Hockey tweeted, Matthew Tkachuk is the perfect player, built for the playoffs, committed to winning. Every franchise could use a dedicated competitor like him. Pierre-Luc Dubois not wanting to extend his pending RFA and seeking a trade instead is gutless. Why would any team want his attitude? I mean, like, there is that element to it as well. Gutless is a big word, is a big thing to call someone, but I don't know. I think that it's a tough thing to give up. You don't have a lot of trade assets to begin with, especially future trade assets. Most likely, I mean, I would assume if Winnipeg sounds like they might be headed for a fire sale. So I don't think they really want guys off your current roster. You're not dealing like, maybe somehow Olmark goes there if Hellebuck's dealt out, but I mean, if you're rebuilding, you don't want roster guys. You want picks and prospects, which you don't have many of, which you do not have many to give up. We'll get into that in a second. But first, Connor, why don't you tell us about our good friends over at FanDuel?
Absolutely, Evan. Listen up, guys. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Finally, you can bet on all your favorite sports, from the money line to point spreads to player props and more. And frankly, that's the best part of FanDuel. You can bet on anything. Want to wager on the odds of Damian Lillard landing in Boston next season? Be my guest. Maybe the Bruins over/under for wins next season? Go for it. So bet now on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use, and of course, an app where you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/Boston and get a no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Please gamble responsibly.
So here comes the big question. What's it going to take to get Pierre-Luc Dubois? Because it's not going to be cheap. As I said, Winnipeg has time with this. They're not in a rush yet. Now, if this, again, was a trade deadline, you would have, they would kind of be up against the clock. There's no such thing here. And you're going to be competing against other teams that would like a guy like him, would like the makeup. What does it take? What's this going to take?
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue, right? Because you have to look at the obvious, right? You're looking at least one or two blue chip prospects, right? You're looking at Lorai, Lysell, Merkulov. You would ideally look at a first round pick, but the Bruins don't have a first round until 2025. And I think they have a second until 2026. So maybe that's something where you have to move an asset or two just to get draft capital to then give to Winnipeg in a trade, which would further complicate things. But then you get to the point now where it's like, all right, the Bruins have guys that I think we've mentioned before that they can move off this roster to especially, save cap space. But you look at Winnipeg and what their approach is going to be this offseason. Is what the Bruins offering fit with what they're looking at, right? Like if this is a team that it's like, all right, like this core is rotten, we got to move Dubois, Wheeler, Scheifele, Hellebuck, what have you. Is what's left of that roster really going to benefit from Linus Ullmark, who's 30? Are they going to benefit from Taylor Hall, who's 31, going on 32? Like, are those the guys that they really would want? You can look at like the team like the Kings or the Oilers or what have you, is a team that would really covet a guy like Ullmark. Winnipeg doesn't really fit that mold. Neither does like a guy like Hall in terms of what he can bring. So then like what guys are you looking at? Like even Grizzly too. Grizzly's 29. Is he a guy that is going to put this rebuilding team over the top?
That's crazy, right? That Matt Grizzlick is already 29.
Yeah, like so the guys that even if you're hesitant about dealing them, but the guys that do make sense in terms of the Bruins have to move. Winnipeg doesn't really seem like a good trade partner in that regard. They're probably looking at younger guys that the Bruins probably covered as well, right? Like Jake DeBrusk, who again, maybe you move him because you don't want to give him that next big contract, but still a 30-goal scorer who's making pretty good money next year at only $4 million. Brennan Carlo, who's another young defenseman who's locked in long term. Like these are guys the Bruins don't necessarily want to be at the top of their list in terms of guys they would like to move, but you got to give to get. So if you're the Bruins, you might have to weigh whether it's worth giving up some of these young assets that you hope is part of the next core in order to get a center that fits that same mold. So it's a tough call for the Bruins. It's not as seamless as just like, all right, Ullmark, Lohrei, and Merkulov, and we got something cooking there. No, it's not going to be the case. You have to give up a couple of useful players on the NHL roster, I think, if you want to get a guy like Dubois.
I also look at it like, because you said, because they don't have that first round pick anytime soon to deal off, you have to instead take a DeBrusk or a Carlo and put them on that list. And does that get it? Like, I don't, to me, I think a first round pick for them is so much more valuable than Jake DeBrusk and what he can bring. I mean, and also the other thing is like, let's just say, I mean, off the top of my head, a trade package of Jake DeBrusk, Fabian Lysell, and like Mason Lohrei, let's say. It's something to do with that, right? You have depth on the wings. So it's fine if you want to trade one of those guys, whether it's Lysell or DeBrusk or Taylor Hall, but you start doing multiple of them and you lose that depth. Now, again, you're gaining that depth down the middle, but I still think it's important. You want guys on the wing, especially at good deals, and Lysell is going to be entry level. DeBrusk obviously going to be in need of his contract next season, but for now it's okay. And I'm also like, I know DeBrusk can put up 30 goals, but is his trade value enough to be the centerpiece of like a deal like this? In place of a first round pick, I don't know. I have a tough time thinking that. So again, I kind of come back to like, I don't know what they would give up. Like, I don't know what would get it done, because again, it's not even just like, is it good enough for Winnipeg? It's more, is it good enough for Winnipeg to ignore everybody else?
Right.
And the answer is probably not. Like, they're teams with their first round picks. They're teams with better prospects, better younger players on their roster. So, I mean, again, I think this is a conversation we're going to have for a lot of different guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, if the Bruins are, if they should trade for them or not. They don't really have the assets to do it. Which again, like, they put the chips to the table this past year, and it kind of goes back to like Don Sweeney has to get more creative going forward in terms of kind of digging them out of this, because I don't know what on the roster is getting them Pierre-Luc Dubois right now. You would need him to almost tank even more. Like, you would need him to just do like, leave all his stuff on the ice, just like get off, have like a complete meltdown. Like, that's what you would need. Like, you pick
like
him up.
Antonio Brown, just like waving goodbye.
Yes. Bye guys. But I don't know what does it. I mean, are we forgetting? Like here's the thing. Would it be Swayman? Would Swayman be the guy? Like, so you get into this. I saw Steve Conroy wrote a story about this in the Herald a few weeks ago about a Jeremy Swayman for Shane Wright trade in theory of like, trade a younger goalie for a younger center like that. And I believe Swayman and Dubois are similar ages. So you would have that. And so then you'd say, you know what, we're going to keep Ullmark. We'll deal Swayman. It's a RFA for RFA type swap. The problem is Winnipeg has Connor Hellebuck. So again, if they trade Hellebuck, then you can, you have options. But I mean, honestly, I think Swayman is the most, appetizing younger guy on the roster that could kind of supplant a first round pick.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it
And I'm
comes
not
down
saying
to
they should, by the way. I'm not saying
right,
they should, especially in
but
this situation.
that's what you have to weigh, right? You look at all these other potential, when we looked at trade chips a few weeks ago, you look at guys like Allmark and Hall and these guys I think all Bruins fans like and view them as key pieces. But if it leads to Bertuzzi or you're able to retain more players, then it's the cost of doing business when you have a team that's already up against this cap crunch. You throw out a guy like Swayman, who you view as good right now and a building block for the future, or even a guy like DeBrusque, if you sign him long term, then Bruins fans are like, wait a second, wait 1 second. But that's kind of the hand you're dealt, right? When you look at not only are you know, have given up multiple, draft picks over the years, and you haven't really had a cupboard full of elite prospects, but also the fact that, as you said, it's not about just getting Winnipeg to say yes. It's about beating all these other teams that have ton more first round picks, ton more prospects to offer beyond maybe guys that they're more willing to part ways with that are kind of in that 24 to 27 age range.
And this 2023 draft is very, very good. I mean, really good. And that's the problem, is that like teams covet these picks now. I mean, you have like basically 3 or 4 guys in this draft that would be number 1 picks in most other drafts. Bedard, Fantilli would be a number 1 pick in most other drafts. Leo Carlson could potentially be Mitchkoff's another one. And you have guys like Will Smith, who I saw this floating around Twitter. I think it was the Reddit Habs Twitter account put this out there, and that someone asked Kent Hughes about Will Smith. Now, Kent Hughes coached Will Smith for a number of years, or for a fair amount of years, with the Boston Junior Eagles. So they have a connection. I feel like that's going to be the next, like, Charlie Coyles from Weymouth type thing. Like around here, it's like, oh my God, like Kent Hughes coached Will Smith, which is sick, by the way, which is awesome. And like the number of youth hockey coaches in this region that, Mike Greer used to coach the Boston Junior Terriers. And like, it's pretty crazy, the connections. Martin St. Louis used to coach Mid Fairfield, all this stuff. This goes with my New England Hockey Journal job. This is what I do during the day. But I think that's gonna be the next thing, of like Will Smith is gonna be like the next Will Smith Kent Hughes comparison is gonna be like the next big, like, Charlie Coyle Weymouth, Matt Groslick from around here type thing. But I digress. Point is, draft picks this year are gonna be hard to come by, and I think people really want to get inside this first round, as they should. Anyways, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, with Pierre-Luc Dubois, where he ends up going and what it takes to get him. Well, before we get to Bruce Cassidy's comments, though, in The Athletic recently, the one thing left on Swayman, which I assume we'll touch on later on, it's tough with these young goalies, and we've talked about this a little bit. Look at a guy like Cal Peterson, who was just dealt, Carter Hart, who feels like he's about to be dealt. These younger goalies, it's hard to predict. It's hard to project. They look like starters. You don't know. Now, if they deal Allmark and Swayman goes in, he's the number 1, and he starts to falter, you start to go, was that smart or not? Like, and you look at a situation like you have Allmark, who is solid, who is going to do the job, going to win the Vezina this year. Like, if you don't deal Swayman for a potential number 1 center, whether it's Dubois or someone else, the problem is you don't want to be 2 years down the road kicking yourself, being like, damn, we chose the wrong goalie. I think that's one of the things with the net situation right now, where like, I fully believe Swayman can be a starter. I believe you do as well, but that doesn't mean he's going to be like that. That's not a sure bet, especially with these younger goalies. So I think, I don't know, you don't want to be left kicking yourself down the road.
Yeah, it's kind of the challenge of dealing with such a position in hockey where there's so much variance, even from established guys. But it's so rare to have a guy that can give you consistently 7-8 years of just elite play. And again, I as you said, I think we both agree that Swayman is a guy that can be a legit number 1 and elite number 1 goaltender. But yeah, you still run that risk, right? The last thing you want to be is the team that does the, shoulda, woulda, coulda in terms of, these draft assets you have, especially when your Bruins team doesn't have an abundance of them. Like, that's why I think we focus in so much on these guys like Swayman or DeBrusque or Carlo or what have you, and whether or not you want to part ways with them. But yeah, it all comes down to how the Bruins view the future of their goaltending, right? You look at just this past year of how elite your goaltending was, then it stalls out and your cup run falls apart. All it takes is one guy to get hot at the right time, and The Bruins probably view Swayman as being part of that equation, but yeah, there's no set reason why, right? I mean, again, you ask Toronto whether they should have traded Tuukka Rask, what do you think they're going to say, right? Like when they thought they were going to be all set at the position, it's the dangers of dealing with goaltending, right? Like you got so much variance there.
Very much so. It's funny. Speaking of goaltending kind of falling out, I saw a tweet today. It was like, name what's the team that should have won a ring that didn't, and it took everything in me. I was like, too soon. I can't. No, I can't say it. I can't say it. Anyways, Bruce Cassidy, who is 2 wins away from winning a Stanley Cup and getting his name on the damn cup, was talking to Jesse Granger, The Athletic, and was being asked kind of about the Boston situation and what this all has been to him. And he said, quote, "You take it a bit personal, right? But I know the circumstances. They did a good job of changing some things. We changed some things here that helped the Knights. Pete DeBoer changed things in Dallas and helped the Stars. You can't beat yourself up over it. Coaches move. I got an opportunity there because a very good coach, Claude Julien, got let go. So that's just the way it works." So I think, again, it hits on the point of, I remember a few years ago, I've tried to find the quote so many times, and I just forget what regular season game it was. I think it was like the 2019-20 season. And someone asked Cassidy about, pushing buttons and how he was kind of making everything work. And he was like, sometime those buttons won't be working anymore. And I'm going to they're going to ship me out of here. And he was always kind of open about that idea of like, this isn't going to last forever. And it didn't. And I think, again, it kind of hits that, like, we've touched on it. Like, I think it says more about the dressing room in there, but I don't think firing Cassidy was the wrong move. I just think the Bruins didn't respond on their own right. Cassidy's a great coach. Some things just have to end, right?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of just how you have to approach this, right? It's two things can be correct, that Bruce Cassidy is a really good coach, but you can also say the Bruins just, the time had come for them to move on, right? Like people always focus on the juicy details of, had he lost the room? Did the younger players not like him? But I think sometimes it's just the circle of life for coaching in the NHL, but in any other sports as well, like even very established coaches, sooner or later, it's inevitable that even the guys that are fully attentive start tuning out the message when it's the same thing they've heard year in and year out, when it's the same system that only has a couple of tweaks here and there with each new season. So, I think, Bruce Cassidy's probably focused on the greater things in terms of, winning the Stanley Cup right now with Vegas. But I think you look at how he summed it up. Of course, he's probably upset. Like, listen, it was a dream job for him as being a Bruins fan growing up. I'm sure he's going to enjoy it very much if he wins the Stanley Cup and gets to rub it in their faces this summer. But him pointing out the fact that, you replace a guy like Julien who won a cup. Pete DeBoer is a very good coach, and Vegas moved on to him because they thought they needed to make a switch there. Usually when a team has to make a switch and management identifies where they start, usually is the coach. So again, it's something that I think you look at how Cassidy kind of summed it up. It all harkens back to the fact that two things can be right. Cassidy's a very good coach, but I think it was just time for the Bruins to move on and put a new voice in there, and especially just the new systems. Again, it didn't work out in the playoffs, but you can't, second guess or now do revisionist history when I think everyone by November, December was like, all right, I see like the change of how that's impacted this team. The new way they're playing, it's getting more out of established guys. Younger players are doing better in it. It was working, right? And I imagine it's still going to continue to work moving forward. So again, the best case scenario here is that both the Bruins and Golden Knights are better off down the road in terms of having two very good coaches leading their respective teams.
Yeah, I don't think you can go back. I mean, everyone was like, mid-season was like, actually the Bruins probably did the right thing. Like, we were all wrong about Cassidy getting fired. We can't now be like, oh, wait a minute. Like, no, you shouldn't have fired him. And it's like, no one ever said he was a bad coach. Like, no one ever said that. Except for Bates Petraglia, who was very open about that back during the 2019 Cup final. But yeah, I mean, clearly, like, and you know what? Good for him. Like, how about that? I mean, what a story that's been, going your first season to Vegas and potentially win a cup. Like, that's huge. Jack Eichel too. You have to think Eichel will probably bring it back to North Chelmsford. So the cup will be in Massachusetts this early summer. But anyways, Connor, I think we've hit on everything we need to hit on. Pierre-Luc Dubois, Bruce Cassidy. Do you want to give, I know that game 3 of the cup final is Thursday night. We're recording this Thursday afternoon. Do you think this is a 2011 situation where the Bruins were down 2-0 and came back to win? Or do you think this is over and Vegas has this in the bag?
I think it's Vegas in 5. I think, I would imagine there's going to be still some more pushback from Panthers. Like they've proven it already in this playoff run. But I just think you look at the way that Vegas is playing, just how they're really smothering anything that Florida's been able to do out there. They keep up their game plan and hold their own, especially when you look at how shaky the goaltending has been for Florida. I think it's Vegas. I go Vegas in 5.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Vegas wins it, but I will say my instincts on these playoffs have pretty much all been
good.
wrong.
Yeah, it's not great.
So Seinfeld reference, if every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite must be right. So maybe I need to say, like, I think the Panthers are actually going to come back and win the series. But no, I think Vegas probably wraps this thing up. I'll say 5 as well. I think Florida pulls one out. I initially had Vegas in 7, but again, Florida's just been not looking so hot, especially in net. That layoff's coming back to bite them. Yes. Connor, what can people look forward to from you over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe?
Yeah, we're going to have covered throughout this offseason. Again, we've covered the Portland Sea Dogs. We've covered a whole bunch of stuff that's not Bruins hockey. So we're going to have you covered with everything going on in Boston sports. But now as we get to the end of the Stanley Cup final, we start looking at the draft, trade, and see all that stuff. We'll really start ramping up here with more Bruins-related content. So you can find all that stuff over at Boston.com. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your week.